The air inside the Galactic Academy's training dome shimmered with heat and anticipation. The chamber was vast, lined with reinforced alloy walls that pulsed faintly with containment fields. Hundreds of cadets filled the tiered stands surrounding the central arena, their voices echoing in a dozen alien dialects. Above them, suspended from the dome's skeletal ceiling, hung massive holoscreens broadcasting the upcoming trial. Warbeast Temperament Test, Command Evaluation Phase. Everyone had heard rumors of what the Academy kept hidden beneath the lower decks, a creature bred not for combat alone, but for measuring courage, presence, and the ability to lead under extreme pressure. Until now, it had only been used for elite graduation trials. Today, the instructors had decided to test the new generation early. The air was heavy with fear, masked as curiosity. When the containment gates began to rise, the noise faded to silence. A low vibration filled the dome, followed by the rhythmic thud of something heavy approaching. Then, out of the shadows, the warbeast appeared. It was enormous, its shoulders higher than a man, its body a blend of reptilian muscle and plated carapace glistening under the artificial lights. 4 luminous eyes glowed amber, scanning the spectators with a predatory calm that felt disturbingly intelligent. A collective gasp rippled through the stands as the creature's tail lashed once, gouging the steel floor with a shriek. The instructors, all veteran officers from different worlds, stood in a semicircle near the barrier. The chief examiner, a tall, grey-skinned Thoran with silver markings across his skull, raised his voice so it echoed across the dome. "Cadets," he began, "before you stands the result of centuries of genetic engineering, a perfect test of authority and instinct. You will each attempt to establish control. The beast does not respond to violence or to fear. It will judge you as much as you judge it." His tone hardened. "Failure is expected. Retreat is allowed. Cowardice is not." A metallic gate opened on the left, revealing the queue of chosen cadets. The first was a broad-shouldered reptilian male from the Drask species, known for their combat instincts. He stepped forward confidently, his scaled fists clenched, and his armor shimmering with deflector fields. As he entered the arena, the beast turned its head slightly, sniffing the air. The Drask let out a guttural growl, a traditional dominance signal in his culture, and took 3 deliberate steps forward. The creature's response was instantaneous. It roared, a sound so deep that it made the floor vibrate, and lunged forward. The cadet barely dove aside in time as the beast's claws shredded the space where he had stood. Emergency shields flickered to life, keeping the spectators safe. The instructors made no move to intervene. The Drask scrambled backward and raised his weapon in reflex, but the beast's tail struck first, sweeping him across the floor like a ragdoll. The chief examiner activated the recall command, and the gate pulled the cadet out as medical drones rushed to his side. The next attempts were no better. A winged female from the Viel species tried psychic resonance, projecting calming thoughts into the creature's mind. The warbeast's 4 eyes narrowed. Then it released a pulse of sound that shattered her focus and sent her crumpling to the ground. Another cadet, an Icarian with a chitinous body, released chemical pheromones designed to signal dominance. The beast inhaled once, roared, and slammed its claws into the floor, cracking it. Within minutes, the line of confident faces turned pale. None had succeeded in lasting more than seconds before retreating or being carried away by drones. The audience grew restless. Murmurs spread through the dome, some mocking, some fearful. The warbeast prowled in slow circles now, restless from the repeated failures, its chest rising and falling like an engine building pressure. Each breath sounded like thunder. The instructors watched closely, recording data, but their expressions betrayed unease. No one had expected the creature to be this unstable. Daniel sat in the 3rd row of the human contingent, silent among his classmates. He had joined the Academy as part of Earth's limited exchange program, a program that many alien officers considered an experiment in curiosity rather than a real contribution. Most humans were smaller, slower, and physically unimpressive compared to their counterparts. But Daniel had not come to impress anyone. He studied the creature, not with excitement, but with quiet observation. His grey eyes tracked its movements, the way its nostrils flared when someone raised their voice, the way its head tilted slightly whenever someone approached from the left. It wasn't random, he realized. It was reacting to intention, not strength. He folded his hands and took a slow breath. The heat of the dome pressed against his skin, but his heartbeat stayed steady. He had read about creatures like this, hybrids born of 7 worlds' apex predators, engineered with neural implants to detect microfluctuations in heart rate and pheromone levels. To such an animal, fear wasn't an emotion. It was a scent, a frequency, a vibration in the air. Every cadet who had tried to dominate it had practically announced their fear before stepping forward. Daniel looked toward the instructors. The chief examiner's voice boomed again. Next, human cadet, Daniel Reeves. A few snickers came from the side rows. Some cadets whispered bets. Humans rarely performed well in tests involving direct confrontation. Daniel rose without expression and walked down the metal steps. His boots echoed faintly. The barrier opened, and a wave of heat and scent hit him, a musky mix of ozone, oil, and the faint metallic tang of blood from damaged drones. The warbeast turned its massive head toward him. The dome fell silent. Every breath from the audience stopped. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his uniform simple, unarmored, his hands empty. The instructors exchanged uncertain glances. One muttered, "He's going to get himself killed." But Daniel didn't stop. The creature lowered its body, muscles tensing. Its breath came in slow, deliberate huffs, as if measuring him. He stopped about 10 meters away. The beast's eyes flicked to his hands, then to his face. Daniel lowered his gaze, not in submission, but to remove challenge. He stood still, breathing evenly, his pulse slow enough for the monitors above to note a strange calm. For a moment, the creature didn't move. Its claws scraped lightly across the floor, making a sound like steel tearing stone. Then, without warning, it let out a roar that made the entire dome vibrate. The shockwave rippled through Daniel's chest, but he didn't flinch. He exhaled softly, barely audible. The creature paused, its head tilting again, confused. The instructors leaned forward. Daniel's lips moved, not shouting, just whispering to himself words no one could hear. The beast's tail twitched, then settled. The two stood there, one towering and armored, the other calm and human, locked in a silent standoff. From the stands, it looked absurd, almost comical, a fragile figure facing a titan. But something subtle had shifted in the air. The creature's breathing matched his. The tension that had filled the dome since the test began to ease. It wasn't obedience yet, but it was no longer hostility either. Daniel looked into its amber eyes and saw something unexpected, a trace of uncertainty, even fatigue. He wondered how many times this creature had been forced to fight, to assert dominance, to survive against endless trials. Maybe it wasn't rage driving it now, but exhaustion. He took one more step forward. The beast didn't strike. It only watched. The instructors finally called time, ending the round before anything could escalate further. Daniel turned and walked back to the gate as the audience whispered in disbelief. The creature's gaze followed him until he was gone. When the barrier closed, it made a low sound, not a growl, not a roar, but something closer to a sigh. The instructors exchanged looks. For the first time that day, the warbeast had paused. The dome's temperature felt cooler somehow, the tension broken. Daniel returned to his seat, silent as before, ignoring the stares. He didn't smile, didn't explain. He simply watched the beast on the screen as it lay down, its head resting on its claws, eyes still fixed on the spot where he had stood. The first phase was over, but something fundamental had shifted in the balance between human and creature, something no one yet understood. The following morning, the dome was quieter than usual. The scent of sterilized metal and ozone still lingered in the air, faint reminders of the previous day's chaos. The war beast remained confined in the center of the training arena, its breathing slow and measured, eyes half closed as if it had barely slept. Around the outer ring of the dome, engineers worked to repair scorched plating and replace shattered drones. The destruction from the earlier trials was still evident. Gouges on the floor, dented barriers, broken light panels dangling from their sockets. Yet despite the damage, there was something almost calm about the creature's posture now. It no longer paced or snarled. It simply watched. Daniel stood at the edge of the observation deck, hands resting against the cold railing, his expression unreadable. He had come early, long before the rest of the cadets, drawn back to the arena by an instinct he couldn't quite name. His mind replayed the previous day in fragments, the roar that had shaken the dome, the pressure in his chest, the strange stillness that followed. The instructors had dismissed him without comment, but he had seen their expressions. They hadn't understood what had happened, only that something had changed. Below him, the beast shifted, lifting its head slightly. Its eyes found him almost immediately, glowing faintly through the glass. Daniel exhaled slowly. The connection was unmistakable. The creature recognized him. Footsteps echoed behind him, breaking the silence. Instructor Varin, the Thoran examiner with silver markings, approached. His gait was stiff, his long coat swaying as he stopped beside Daniel. "You're early, human," he said, his deep voice steady but curious. "Curiosity, sir," Daniel replied without looking up. "Or something close to it." Varin's sharp eyes studied him for a moment. "It seems the beast remembers you. It has been unnaturally calm since your session." Daniel didn't answer immediately. "Maybe it's tired of fighting," he said finally. "Or maybe it doesn't see a reason to anymore." Varin's jaw tightened. "It's a construct of war and obedience. It doesn't feel reasons. It reacts." His tone softened slightly. "But perhaps reaction is precisely what we've misunderstood." He turned, motioning toward the arena. "The Academy leadership wants further trials today. We will analyze its responses under controlled stimuli. You will observe from the control deck." Daniel nodded. "Understood." As the day progressed, cadets from different divisions filed in, whispering among themselves. The spectacle of the war beast had already become Academy legend. Hollow recordings from the first test had circulated through the dorms overnight, accompanied by wild speculation. Some said the human had used a chemical trick, others that he had employed forbidden neural tech. Daniel ignored the rumors. He sat silently at the edge of the upper deck, watching as a group of technicians activated the dome's simulation grid. The air shimmered with energy, projecting a series of holographic illusions meant to provoke the creature. Flashes of movement, predator calls, and simulated weapon fire. The beast reacted instantly, muscles tensing, tail sweeping across the floor in irritation. Its growl resonated through the chamber, and the temperature sensors spiked from the creature's body heat. The cadets leaned forward, murmuring. Varin stood beside the control panel, his eyes fixed on the data streams. "Stimulus pattern A17, continue," he ordered. The technicians complied, increasing the frequency of the visual projections. The creature snarled and reared up, smashing its forelegs against the floor with a thunderous impact. The energy barriers rippled, but held. Its agitation was growing. "Shut it down," Daniel said suddenly. Varin turned sharply. "What?" "Shut it down," Daniel repeated, his tone calm but firm. "You're pushing it too fast. It's not aggression. It's confusion." Varin hesitated, his expression unreadable, but something in Daniel's voice carried quiet authority. He gestured toward the console, and the technicians powered down the stimuli. The holograms faded, leaving only silence. The war beast blinked, snorted, and lowered itself slowly to the ground again, its chest rising and falling as it steadied its breathing. "You see?" Daniel said quietly. "It's responding to intention. It doesn't need dominance. It needs clarity." Varin folded his arms. "You speak as though you understand it." "I don't," Daniel said. But I'm starting to think understanding isn't the point. It's about not forcing what doesn't need to be forced. Varen regarded him for a long moment. We may test that theory sooner than you think, he said finally. Tomorrow, the senior division will attempt team synchronization with the creature. You're being assigned to the control group. Daniel frowned. Control group. You'll observe physiological and behavioral metrics, but you will not engage it again. Orders from the board. He turned away, his coat brushing against the railing. The Academy prefers predictable results. After Varen left, Daniel remained alone in the observation deck. His reflection hovered faintly against the glass, overlapping the image of the beast below. The creature was staring back at him again, unblinking. He couldn't help feeling that the decision to exclude him was less about protocol and more about fear. Fear that something unpredictable might happen if he interacted with it again. He didn't know whether that fear was justified or not. Later that afternoon, the synchronization trials began. A team of 4 cadets entered the dome, wearing neural interface headsets designed to transmit bioelectrical signals directly into the creature's perception field. The idea was to link thoughts to command impulses, creating instantaneous obedience. The Academy had been developing the system for years, but no one had successfully bonded with the creature. The cadets lined up in formation, raising their hands to activate the neural grid. The war beast stirred, its eyes flashing with warning light. The cadets focused, sending waves of directed intent, command, restraint, subdue. For a few seconds, it appeared to work. The beast froze, head lowering slightly, as if awaiting instruction. But then something in the transmission faltered. A sudden pulse of static surged across the neural field, and the cadets staggered backward as sparks danced along their suits. The beast reacted violently. It roared and lunged, slamming into the barrier with such force that the dome's stabilizers flickered. Sirens wailed. The instructors shouted orders, scrambling to stabilize the containment field. One cadet fell, struck by a feedback surge that left him unconscious. Daniel was already moving. Before anyone could stop him, he ran toward the emergency lift, his heart pounding but his mind steady. He reached the lower level and stepped into the auxiliary chamber connected to the arena. A technician tried to block his path, but he brushed past him. "Override sequence Delta 7, he said sharply, remembering the emergency codes he had studied during his maintenance rotations. The door opened, and the roar of the beast thundered through the corridor. The lights flickered red. When he entered, the creature was thrashing against the energy barrier, panic in its movements. Its claws tore through the metal grates, and each breath came like a blast furnace. Daniel approached the console, lowering the containment intensity slightly, enough to reduce the painful feedback loop that was driving it mad. The beast's movements slowed. Its head turned toward him again, nostrils flaring as it recognized his scent. "That's it," he murmured. "It's over. No one's trying to control you." The creature's massive chest rose and fell. Slowly, its growl faded into a deep rumble. The technicians shouted through the intercom, demanding he step away, but he ignored them. The creature pressed its head lightly against the barrier, inches from the transparent wall that separated them. Daniel lifted his hand and placed it against the surface. The air shimmered between them, the energy field humming faintly. For a moment, the dome seemed to hold its breath. The monitors showed a sudden drop in stress indicators. The creature's heart rate stabilized. The sirens went silent. When the instructors finally arrived, Varen was the first to speak. His voice was tight with disbelief. "What did you do?" Daniel turned to him. "I stopped fighting it." Varen stared at him, then at the now calm beast lying on the floor. "You realize this will force a full reassessment of the program," he said quietly. Daniel's gaze returned to the creature. Maybe that's what's needed. He didn't know why the connection worked, only that it did. But deep down, he sensed that this was no accident. Something in the design of the beast, or in the nature of the human mind, had bridged an ancient divide between dominance and understanding. Outside the dome, The night sky stretched endlessly across the Academy's outer shields. Inside, a new kind of silence settled, one that felt less like the end of an experiment and more like the beginning of something the instructors were not yet ready to name. The following days at the Galactic Academy unfolded under a strange and growing tension. Whispers traveled through the corridors, through the mess halls, and even into the training decks. Rumors about the human cadet who had done what no other species could. Some said he had discovered a secret control frequency. Others claimed he possessed empathic implants banned by the Academy. But Daniel ignored the talk. He spent every morning observing the war beast from the upper deck as engineers and biologists ran diagnostics from a safe distance. The creature's behavior had changed entirely. It no longer roared or thrashed against containment. It lay still most of the time, its massive chest rising slowly, its eyes following every technician that entered, but without hostility. The instructors didn't call Daniel for further tests, but he felt the change in how people looked at him. Some cadets avoided his gaze altogether, as if his presence carried danger. Others approached with cautious curiosity, trying to extract information. He said little. The truth was, he didn't know exactly what had happened himself. He only knew that something inside the creature had responded to calm, not command. It was a small difference that frightened those who built their careers on control. 3 days later, Instructor Varin summoned him to the behavioral lab adjacent to the dome. The room was dimly lit, its walls lined with hollow panels showing waveforms, neural signatures, and stress readings. The war beast's biological data glowed in steady patterns across the screens. Varin stood at the central console, hands clasped behind his back. Beside him was a woman Daniel hadn't seen before, a xenobiologist with pale green skin and dark eyes that reflected the light of the monitors. Varin motioned toward her. "This is Dr. Kelra. She specializes in neural resonance studies. She believes your interaction with the subject produced measurable anomalies." Dr. Kelra regarded him with a clinical sort of fascination. "You reduced its aggression levels by 80% in less than 4 minutes. The Academy's control algorithms have never achieved half that," she said. "We need to understand why." Daniel looked at the main screen, watching the beast's neural patterns pulse like a heartbeat. "Maybe it's not something you can program," he said quietly. Varin frowned. "The Academy does not accept mysticism as explanation, Cadet." Daniel didn't respond. He studied the data in silence, noting that every time the creature's stress markers spiked, its sensory cortex flashed in patterns identical to human limbic response. The readings looked less like those of a weapon and more like those of something alive and self-aware. He turned toward Kelra. "You've been monitoring it continuously." She nodded. 28 hours a day cycle. It remains alert but docile. It refuses to eat unless you're present in the observation wing. That detail made Varin pause. "Is that confirmed?" "Yes," Kelra said, her tone firm. "Its behavior changes when he enters the deck. Its vitals stabilize. When he leaves, agitation returns gradually." Varin's expression hardened. "That complicates matters. The board plans to move the subject off-site for advanced weaponization trials. We can't have it forming attachments." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Weaponization?" Kelra folded her arms. "It's classified, but yes, the war beast was created to test obedience thresholds for future military use. If it can bond with a handler, it can be deployed. But if it bonds too deeply, it becomes useless as a tool." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You built something intelligent enough to feel, and now you want to erase what makes it alive." Varin's voice grew cold. "You're a cadet, not a philosopher. You will assist the research as ordered." The conversation ended there, but the unease stayed with him long after he left the lab. That night, he lay awake in his quarters, the hum of the Academy's ventilation system faint in the background. He thought about the beast confined beneath layers of containment fields, about its luminous eyes watching every technician, waiting for something it couldn't name. He remembered the brief moment of stillness between them, the breath they had shared through the energy barrier. It had felt like recognition, not as predator and prey, not even as master and servant, but as two beings caught in the same cage, built by those who sought to measure strength by domination. The next morning, he arrived at the dome before dawn. The observation lights were still dim, casting long shadows across the floor. The creature was awake, standing near the barrier, its gaze already fixed on him. He approached the transparent field and stopped a few meters away. "I know you can't understand me," he said softly, "but I think you know what's happening." The beast tilted its head, a slow, deliberate motion that sent a chill through him. "They're planning to move you," he continued, "somewhere far from here. I don't think you'll come back." The creature huffed, a low rumble that vibrated through the glass. Daniel pressed his palm against the barrier. The beast mirrored the gesture, lowering its massive head until one of its eyes aligned with his face. For a long time, neither moved. Then the silence was shattered by the hiss of the dome's access gate. Varen entered, followed by two armored security officers and Dr. Kelra. She carried a portable console and avoided Daniel's eyes. Varen's voice was clipped and official. "Cadet Reeves, you are to step back. The transfer begins in 1 hour. You will not interfere." Daniel stood his ground. "You'll destroy what makes it peaceful." Varen's expression was unreadable. Peace is irrelevant to its purpose. Step back. He hesitated, but eventually complied, moving toward the edge of the deck. The technicians began preparing the transport rig, a massive platform surrounded by stabilizer rings and magnetic locks. The beast growled softly, sensing the rising tension. The containment field flickered as they initiated the energy dampeners that would sedate it for transport. Kelra's hands trembled slightly as she keyed in the sedation protocol. Her voice was low. "Field inhibitors at 70%, heart rate increasing, neural resistance forming." Varen barked, "Increase output." The creature roared, its body convulsing against the restraints. The deck lights flickered violently. Daniel felt the vibration through his boots as the energy field screamed under pressure. He could see the pain in its eyes, raw, desperate confusion. Something inside him broke. "Stop it!" he shouted. "You're killing it!" Varen ignored him. "Full sedation now!" Before he realized what he was doing, Daniel sprinted toward the console. Kelra tried to stop him, but he slammed his hand against the emergency override. The sedation field cut instantly, and the alarms blared. The beast collapsed to one knee, then steadied itself, breathing hard. The guards drew their weapons, but Varen raised a hand to halt them. Daniel turned to face him. "If you keep treating it like a weapon, it'll become one. You can't force loyalty through pain." Varen's jaw clenched. "You've crossed a line, Cadet." Daniel took a slow breath. "Maybe. But I'm right." The tension in the room stretched like a drawn wire. Varen looked from Daniel to the creature, then back again. The beast was no longer struggling. It was watching both of them, chest heaving, eyes flickering between defiance and understanding. Kelra finally spoke, her voice subdued. "Sir, if we push it again, we risk a neural collapse. The subject might die." Varen exhaled sharply, his shoulders stiff. "Fine. Suspend the transfer until further notice." He turned to Daniel. "You've earned yourself a tribunal review. Report to the disciplinary wing at 800. Daniel didn't answer. He watched as Varen and the guards exited the dome, leaving only Kelra behind. She lingered near the console, her expression conflicted. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied, "but you saw what it was doing to it." She looked at the beast, which had lowered itself onto the floor again, breathing in slow, measured waves. "I don't think it's just reacting to you," she said after a pause. "I think it's learning from you." Her words lingered as he left the dome. Outside, the sun was rising over the Academy's shielded horizon, washing the silver towers in pale gold. For the first time since arriving, he felt something larger than training or duty stirring beneath the surface of the place. A realization that what he had done wasn't defiance for its own sake. It was the beginning of a question that no one else dared to ask. What if the measure of strength across the galaxy wasn't domination at all, but empathy? That thought followed him through the corridors, echoing in his mind long after the disciplinary summons reached his terminal. Somewhere behind the containment walls, the war beast lifted its head once more, staring toward the direction he had gone. The connection between them was no longer coincidence. It was something alive, and both of them knew that whatever was coming next would test the fragile balance between trust and survival in ways neither was prepared for. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the next morning, but Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat on the narrow bed of his dormitory, staring at the faint lines of light from the city outside the Academy dome. The automated message confirming his tribunal hearing had come just before midnight, formal and cold, signed by the command office of the Intergalactic Cadet Corps. The charge was interference with military procedure, an unauthorized override of a restricted system. The message ended with a single sentence: attendance mandatory, dismissal and permanent record mark likely. He had expected as much, yet the weight of it pressed on him like a slow, suffocating fog. Still, what bothered him most wasn't the risk to his future. It was the thought of the creature confined below, left in the dark after the aborted transfer. He couldn't shake the image of its trembling body and the way its gaze had lingered on him, as though asking for help in the only way it could. At dawn, the academy corridors were nearly empty. The artificial sky above the courtyard glowed with soft amber light as he made his way to the tribunal chamber. The air felt heavy, metallic, charged with the cold precision of bureaucracy. The chamber itself was small and sterile, its walls lined with hollow panels displaying regulations and procedural codes. 3 instructors sat at the front table, Varen among them, expression unreadable. To his right was a senior administrator in a white uniform, her eyes sharp and cold. Dr. Kelra stood at the side, not as a witness, but as an observer. Cadet Daniel Reeves, the administrator began, her voice clipped and precise. You are charged with unauthorized interference during a containment operation, violation of safety protocol, and insubordination. Do you deny these actions? Daniel met her gaze. No, he said evenly. I did what I had to. Varen leaned forward slightly. Explain your reasoning. He took a breath. You were torturing it. It wasn't disobedient. It was reacting to pain. If your goal was to destroy its trust, you succeeded. If your goal was to understand it, you failed. The administrator's eyes narrowed. Cadet, this facility does not conduct emotional experiments. The subject is property of the Galactic Defense Division, not a living entity with rights. Then that's the problem, Daniel said quietly. You built something intelligent enough to respond to empathy, and then punished it for not wanting to die. A faint murmur rippled through the room. Varen's jaw tensed. You presume too much. The subject's capacity for response is not intelligence. It's an adaptive survival algorithm. Then explain why it calms when I approach, Daniel said. Why it stops resisting when I speak to it. Varen's expression flickered, just for a moment, revealing doubt he quickly masked. The administrator leaned back. Enough. The board will deliberate. You will remain confined to quarters until a decision is made. The hearing ended as abruptly as it began, as Kelra caught up with him in the corridor outside. She lowered her voice. You're right about it. The readings continue to show a neural pattern consistent with higher cognition. But if you keep challenging command, you'll be expelled before you can prove it. Daniel looked at her. Then help me. She hesitated, glancing down the hallway. There's a maintenance shift tonight during the storm drills. The outer systems will go offline for calibration. If you wanted to see it again, that would be your only chance. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she turned away without another word. When night came, the academy lights dimmed to emergency glow, and thunder rolled faintly above the dome. The weather grid was simulating a Category 7 plasma storm for atmospheric training, enough to disrupt local communications and power feeds for several minutes at a time. Daniel waited until the monitors outside his dorm blinked into static before moving. He slipped through the maintenance corridors, his passcode overridden by a string of sequences he had memorized weeks earlier during his technical rotations. Each door hummed softly as it recognized the outdated clearance tags still linked to his cadet record. By the time he reached the containment level, the storm simulation was peaking. The dome lights flickered red, and arcs of controlled lightning lit the air above the arena through the transparent ceiling. The warbeast stood near the center, its body tense but unmoving. Even through the static hum of the failing systems, Daniel could sense its distress. The containment field around it wavered, its blue shimmer pulsing irregularly with each flicker of the grid. He moved closer, the hum of the control panels guiding him in the dark. "It's me," he said softly. "You're safe." The creature turned its head slowly. Its amber eyes glowed through the haze of energy. It gave a low rumble, half growl, half exhale, that resonated through the metal floor. Daniel reached the console and saw that the field stabilizers were failing. If the grid collapsed completely, the beast could panic, or worse, suffocate from the energy fluctuations. Without thinking, he started recalibrating the dampeners manually, rerouting excess power into the reserve capacitors. The creature moved closer to the barrier, its movements slow and deliberate. He could see the pulse under its scaled neck, the rise and fall of its chest. Lightning flashed again above, illuminating the dome in stark white light. The thunder was deafening, but the beast didn't roar. It merely crouched, its gaze fixed entirely on him. A voice suddenly crackled through the comm speaker. "Reeves, what in the void are you doing down there?" It was Varin. Daniel froze for a second, then pressed the comm switch. "Containment's unstable. If it collapses, the creature dies." "You're not authorized to touch that console," Varin's voice thundered through the static. "Step away now." "No," Daniel said, his tone firm. "If I step away, you'll lose it for good." Before Varin could respond, the power surged violently. The lights went black, and for one heartbeat the dome was lit only by the pulse of the containment field, and then that too failed. The air filled with the sharp scent of ozone as the energy collapsed in a shimmer of blue sparks. The creature was free. Daniel felt the shift before he saw it. The floor trembled, dust falling from the rafters as the beast took one slow step toward him. The security alarms failed to trigger. The storm had fried the sensors. He could hear Varin shouting orders through the comm, but the signal was fractured by interference. He stood perfectly still, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The beast was close enough that he could feel the heat from its body. It lowered its head, eyes fixed on him. He raised his hand slowly, palm outward. "It's all right," he whispered. "No one's going to hurt you." The creature made a deep sound, almost like a sigh, and then, impossibly, it lay down. The massive body settled onto the floor, scales scraping softly against metal. The glow in its eyes softened. For a long time, Daniel didn't move. He felt the vibration of the storm above, the hum of broken systems, and the slow, steady rhythm of the creature's breath. He realized he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Varin and a security team arrived minutes later, forcing the emergency lights back online. The sight that greeted them silenced the entire deck. Daniel stood beside the massive creature, hand resting gently on its scaled neck. The beast's head was lowered, eyes half closed, utterly calm. Varin's face was pale. "Step away from it," he said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "You see, it doesn't want to fight." For the first time since Daniel had met him, Varin looked uncertain. His voice trembled slightly. "Do you understand what you've done? That thing is capable of killing every person in this building." "But it hasn't," Daniel said. "You built it to respond to dominance. All I did was give it trust. Maybe you should start asking why that works." Varin didn't answer. The security officers exchanged uneasy glances, waiting for orders that never came. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder growing distant. Dr. Kelra arrived moments later, breathless, her coat soaked from the rain leaking through the faulty roof seals. When she saw Daniel and the beast, she stopped in her tracks. "It's impossible," she murmured. "The neural inhibitors were disengaged." Daniel looked up at her. "Maybe it doesn't need them." The beast lifted its head slightly and made a low sound, soft, resonant, like a hum of acknowledgement. Kelra stared at it in disbelief. Varin rubbed his temples, his expression caught between anger and awe. "Containment Protocol Gamma," he finally said. "But no sedation. We do this carefully." The officers nodded, approaching with portable stabilizers, though none dared come too close. Daniel stepped back slowly, giving the creature space. It watched him, but did not resist, as the new containment field hummed to life around it. As the dome filled again with structured light, the tension in the room began to ease. Kelra's hands were shaking. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. "It's as if it chose to submit." Varin looked at Daniel, his voice low. "You may have saved it, or doomed us all. Either way, this changes everything." Daniel didn't respond. He watched the creature settle again within the shimmering blue cage, calm and silent. The storm outside had passed, leaving a strange, almost peaceful stillness in its wake. In that moment, he realized that whatever this connection was, it had reached a point beyond experiment or accident. It had become something alive, something neither man nor machine could control. He turned to Varin and Kelra. "You can't move it now," he said quietly. "If you do, you'll break what's left of its trust." Varin didn't argue. He only nodded once and left the deck, his footsteps echoing against the metal floor. Kelra lingered behind, staring through the barrier at the creature's massive form. "It trusts you completely," she said. "I don't know what that means yet, but I think it's no longer just a subject." Daniel looked up at the glowing dome above them. Maybe it never was. He stood there until the lights stabilized and the night shift took over. The dome was quiet, except for the faint hum of the containment field and the slow, rhythmic breathing of the creature resting peacefully behind it. Outside, lightning still flickered on the horizon, but inside the academy, for the first time, there was a fragile, undeniable sense of understanding, one that could no longer be ignored. The academy did not return to normal after the storm. In the days that followed, the incident spread through every corridor, lab, and command office. No one could agree on what had truly happened inside the dome that night. Some called it an act of defiance that jeopardized the entire facility. Others whispered that the human cadet had achieved something unprecedented, an emotional synchronization between a man and a weapon designed never to feel. Every department wanted to claim the discovery, to rewrite the event in its own version of truth. But beneath the politics, something undeniable had changed. The war beast no longer fit into any category. It had become a symbol of a question the academy was not prepared to answer. Daniel spent most of his time confined to the upper observation deck. Officially, he was under supervision pending further disciplinary review. Unofficially, Varin had ordered that he remain close to the creature until the board could decide what to do with both of them. The instructors did not admit it aloud, but none of the technicians dared enter the dome without him. The beast refused to cooperate when he was absent, ignoring commands, refusing nourishment, and pacing restlessly until he returned. The connection between man and creature had become too visible to deny. Each morning, Daniel would enter the observation platform to find the beast waiting near the barrier, silent but alert. It no longer felt dangerous. There was something almost solemn in its stillness, as if it understood that the world around it was watching, judging. Daniel often sat cross-legged near the containment field, speaking softly, not with orders, but with simple observations. He told it about the dawn, about the sound of the generators, about the cold taste of recycled air. He didn't know if it understood the words, but he could sense its calm deepen when he spoke. Sometimes he imagined it was listening not to his words, but to his voice itself, following the rhythm of his breathing as a guide. Dr. Kelra visited frequently, bringing portable monitors and recording every interaction. Her scientific curiosity had grown into something like reverence. She began to call the beast the subject, but in a softer tone now, almost as though she were afraid to insult it. One afternoon, she found Daniel standing closer to the barrier than usual, his hand resting just above the energy shimmer. "You talk to it as if it were human," she said quietly. "Maybe it's more than that," he replied. "It knows fear, hunger, trust. That's more than half the species in this academy." Kelra smiled faintly. "If you keep speaking like that, you'll be cited for romanticism." He looked at her. "Then cite me for honesty instead." The conversation ended there, but Kelra's eyes softened. She no longer saw him as a reckless cadet. She saw someone who had stepped beyond protocol into something the Academy's logic could not explain. 2 weeks later, the board convened again. This time, the entire command hierarchy attended. Admirals from the Galactic Defense Division, scientists from the Research Council, and ethicists flown in from off-world. The chamber was brighter than before, its polished walls reflecting the light of a dozen projectors. Varen stood at the center, briefing the panel. Daniel and Kelra sat in silence behind him. "The creature remains stable," Varen reported. "No aggression, no physiological anomalies. The human cadet's presence appears to suppress stress responses. It may be the first successful cross-species behavioral bond achieved without neural augmentation." An admiral, his face hidden behind a visor of mirrored glass, leaned forward. "Then replicate it," he said. "Train others to do the same." Varen hesitated. "We have attempted. The subject only responds to Cadet Reeves. Other handlers elicit immediate agitation." "Then isolate the variable," the Admiral said. "Find what makes the human different." Kelra spoke up before Varen could respond. "It's not a variable," she said. "It's empathy." The room fell silent. Several officers exchanged puzzled looks. The Admiral's tone sharpened. "Empathy is not a quantifiable asset." Kelra's voice remained steady. "It is now." The board dismissed her statement as sentimentality, but Daniel could see the unease in their faces. The possibility that compassion might outperform control disturbed the entire hierarchy. By the end of the session, the board decided to transfer both the creature and Daniel to a remote facility for long-term evaluation. The phrasing was bureaucratic, but everyone knew what it meant: containment disguised as research. That night, as technicians prepared the transport vessel, Daniel stood beside the containment field one last time. The dome was dark, except for the faint blue glow of the energy lattice. The beast was awake, eyes fixed on him. He could feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on his chest. "They want to take you away," he said quietly. "They'll study you until there's nothing left to learn, and then they'll call it progress." The creature's head tilted, and a low, resonant hum escaped its throat. Daniel closed his eyes. "I'm not going to let that happen." The idea had been forming in his mind since the tribunal, half instinct, half desperation. The dome's security protocols were complex, but not impenetrable. During his maintenance shifts, he had memorized the sequences needed to redirect the containment field into reverse polarity. If triggered carefully, it would lower the barrier for 20 seconds before the system rebooted, enough time to act. He waited until the technicians sealed the transfer pod and left the deck. Then he entered the manual override chamber and began typing the sequence. The system beeped softly, warning him of unauthorized access. He ignored it. The lights dimmed, and the containment field flickered. The beast lifted its head, sensing the change. "You have to go," Daniel whispered. "You weren't meant to live in a cage." The barrier dissolved in a shimmer of light. For a moment, the creature didn't move, as if uncertain whether it could trust what it saw. Then, slowly, it stepped forward, massive claws clicking softly on the metal floor. It reached him, lowering its head until its eyes met his. He could feel the heat of its breath on his skin. "Go," he said again, his voice trembling, "before they stop you." Instead of fleeing, the creature nudged him gently with its snout, a gesture so deliberate it nearly broke him. Then it turned toward the open transport gate. With a low, guttural roar that echoed through the dome like thunder, it leaped into the night beyond the hangar. The sound faded into the distance until only the hum of the dying field remained. The alarms began seconds later. Red lights flooded the corridors. Varen and Kelra arrived together, sprinting toward the control deck. When they saw the empty containment cell, Kelra froze. "You let it go," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "It deserved freedom." Varen's voice was hard. "You realize what you've done. You've destroyed years of research." Daniel met his gaze. "No, I gave it a chance to live." Varen said nothing more. The security team searched the perimeter for hours, but found nothing. The beast had vanished into the storm systems beyond the Academy's range. By morning, the official report labeled it an escape due to containment failure. Daniel was expelled from the Academy under sealed record. Kelra resigned 2 days later. Varen disappeared from public service entirely. Months passed. Daniel returned to Earth, taking work far from the military networks that once defined his life. The nights were quiet there, and sometimes he would look up at the sky, wondering where the creature had gone. He doubted he would ever see it again. Yet he carried with him the memory of that final moment, the way it had paused, the warmth in its eyes, the silent understanding that had passed between them. One evening, as he walked along the ridge above the old coastal observatory, he felt a faint vibration beneath his feet. The air shimmered with heat, though the wind was cold. He turned toward the horizon and saw a glint of amber far off in the clouds, followed by a deep, familiar sound that rolled across the sea like distant thunder. He smiled faintly, closing his eyes. He didn't need proof. He already knew. In the years that followed, reports began to surface across the outer colonies, sightings of massive scaled creatures appearing at disaster zones, shielding settlements from storms, driving off predators. None were ever captured. Official records dismissed them as myth. But those who witnessed the events spoke of one detail that never changed. The creatures always arrived silently, waited until danger passed, and vanished again into the wilderness. Daniel never sought recognition. He grew old quietly, teaching children in a small coastal town about the stars and the fragile balance between life and control. Sometimes he would pause mid-lecture and look toward the ocean, smiling to himself, remembering the lesson no classroom had ever taught him, that understanding was stronger than power, and that peace was not submission, but trust freely given. When he died many years later, the night sky above his home glowed faintly for hours, though there were no storms that evening. Locals claimed they heard a low, resonant sound from beyond the clouds, like the distant breath of something vast and ancient. No one could explain it, but those who knew his story said it was the creature returning one last time, keeping watch over the man who had freed it. And in the archives of the old academy, long after its walls had crumbled, a single phrase was still engraved above the entrance to the dome: "Power follows peace."